Hi everyone, and thanks for coming. In multiplayer design, we usually ask ourselves, how do we make good feel fair? We worry about balance, we worry about stats, and we worry about power creep. But as I developed my 4-player co-op survival shooter, I realized that fairness is actually just the surface level. The real question we should be asking is, how does the structure of your loot pool dictate the physical tempo of your game? In roguelike, randomness generates content, but in multiplayer it dictates the pacing. Today we'll explore the tension between shared loot pools and individual progression. I'll show you how my shared deck system eliminated the pacing wedge using data from 12 players to prove that bench symmetry drives multiplayer retention. When we look at slide below, we're seeing the fundamental architecture choice of multiplayer design. This isn't just a UI decision, it's a decision about social contract of your game session. On the left, we have shared model. In a game like Deep Rock Galactic, loot is what we call a social object. When a player interacts with minerals or resources, the entire network state updates for everyone. The reward is simultaneous. From a design perspective, this creates unified pacing. Because everyone's power level and progression is staggered, the team naturally moves as a single organism. There's no incentive to hoard or split off because a gain for one is gain for all. You are designing for a squad where the unit of success is group's total output. Other games that use this model are other co-op games like Hilarious 2. Now look at the right, the individual model. This is the standard for games like Destiny 2. This model maximizes player autonomy. It's built on the my loot, my build philosophy. I don't have to care about what you found. I only care about my specific kit and my specific RNG luck. Other games that use this model are other looter shooters like Borderlands 4 and JRPGs like Diablo 4. On paper, this is great for player agency. It allows for deeper build diversity. But from a networking and social standpoint, this is where I call the rift begins. As researcher Itu Turkon explores the moment rewards become separate, players' goals begin to diverge, the shared mission becomes secondary to the individual grind. The rift is where players stop playing together and start playing near each other. Other when players when player A finds a S tier perk and player B finds nothing, there is motivations for the rest of the round shift. When player A pushes into high threat zones, test their power, player B wants to stay back and scavenge and catch up. By separating loot, you are inadvertently introducing systemic friction. You are forcing the player to choose between the team's efficiency and their own progression. The slide represents the ultimate fork in the road. Do you want your players to feel like a unified squad or like individuals who happen to be in the same room? This decision will every dictate every networking, balancing, and pacing challenge you will face in the rest of the development. Now let's see how individual fortune choice manifests in actual gameplay, especially in a roguelike, where randomness isn't just a feature, it's an engine. In single-player roguelike, RNG is a challenge to be overcome. If you get a bad draw, you adapt or you die. But in multiplayer, randomness ceases to be a challenge and starts acting as a pacing wedge. Look at the diagram. When you have a high variance loot pool that aren't synced, you are driving a stake through the group's cohesion. These start at the same line, but within 2 rounds, the wedge has physically split the team. Here we see pace drag. This is where the core loop of the third-person shooter begins to tear. Take player 1. They got lucky. They drew a god-tier mobility perk and a massive AoE modifier. They're having a power fantasy. They're moving at 100 miles per hour. But look at player 2. They drew a utility perk, a slight reload buff, or a defensive stat. They are stuck at 20 miles per hour. In a single player game, player 2 just having a bad run. They hit reset. In multiplayer, there is no reset button. Player 2 is now in a pace trap. Because the maps are procedurally generated, they designed for a certain survival time. Player 1 is now forced to either sprint ahead and play solo, or stay back and carry the teammate who feels useless. This creates a massive social friction. I have observed in my playtests that communication shifts when the wedge is present. It stops being tactical, cover my flank, and starts being logistical. Where are you? Hurry up. The god tier player is bored because the game is moving too slow. The underpowered player is frustrated because the game is moving too fast. As developers, we often balance for the average power of the group. But the data shows that players don't experience that, they experience the delta. The gap between the fastest and the slowest, and in a network game, the gap is where fun goes to die. I realized this wasn't just a feeling, it was a statistical reality that was killing our round retention. We needed a way to keep the individual draw feeling, but keep the wedge, but kill the wedge permanently. This led us to the experiment. To solve the pacing wedge, I didn't want to get rid of the excitement of individual builds. I just wanted to tether their destination. This led to my project's core mechanic, the Global Deck. In my 4-player survival shooter, we used a shared loot pool of perks. When the draw phase happens at the end of the round, each player pulls from the same deck. Here's the twist. Every player receives a different perk in the moment, but in the end of the session, the players will have drawn the exact same set of perks. We call this sequential symmetry. Prove this worked, I ran an experiment. We tracked 12 players split into 4 groups across 15 rounds of survival on my procedural maps. I wanted to see if eventual equality could solve the social friction I saw earlier. I focused on 2 metrics: hurdle, the gap between the strongest and the weakest player, and the survival time. How much time can they survive on the procedural map? I wanted to know, does knowing you will catch up change how you play now? Data revealed what I now call rubber band effect on pacing. Look at the peak of the graph, around round 3. In early game, my shared deck actually creates a high power delta. Because player 1 drew the damage perk, while player 2 drew the utility perk, the roles are forced to be different. This is actually a good thing. It creates a tactical split, where players naturally fall into vanguard and support roles. Because they know this is temporary, they lean into these roles instead of resenting them. The magic happens at round 8. Because everyone is drawing from the same finite deck, the power delta begins to collapse. By the time players hit the final rounds, the gap in their efficiency is near zero. Unlike games with purely infinite RNG, my groups didn't suffer from the 15-round wall. My time of survival stabilized significantly. I found that late game round survival was 22% longer than in my random drop builds. Why? Because the squad moves as a single perfect synchronized unit of destruction. The pacing wedge isn't just managed, it is systematically eliminated. So I compared my players' behavior against the industry baseline of probable catch-up. In most roguelikes, if you were the weak link, you hope for a lucky drop to catch up. That hope is a gamble. In my study, I found that catch-up was guaranteed by the deck. My 12 players completed an average of nearly 14 out of 15 rounds. I didn't see the early exit phenomenon common in multiplayer shooters where one player feels left behind. Players are willing to endure being the support or low damage teammate for few rounds because the system provides a visible expiration date on bad luck. I found that when the network guarantees eventual symmetry, players don't just play better, they play longer. We weren't just balancing stats, we were balancing player commitment. The shared deck system fundamentally changed the relationship between my players within a single round. It creates what I call tactical handover. In a standard RNG system, if I draw the God build early, I become the permanent carry. My teammates become my bodyguards. They stop playing the game and start watching me play it. But in my system, because we draw from the same deck, if I draw the shield perk in round 2, I know I am the vanguard for now. I take point, I clear the path. But my teammates aren't frustrated by this because they know statistically that by round 5 that shield perk coming to them too. The carry dynamic shifts into fluid rotation roles. This synchronization is why our 12 players reported the highest satisfaction scores in our later rounds. They didn't feel like they were drifting apart, they felt the team was assembling into a unified powerhouse. The social friction of the wedge was replaced by anticipatory coordination. So, what is the ultimate key takeaway from your next multiplayer project? First, balance is pacing. Don't look at loot stats in a vacuum. A power gap between your network users is a pace drop. That will eventually break your procedural map flow. Second, prioritize outcome over order. You can give players the autonomy of individual builds and unique roles, but must guarantee endgame parity. If your destination is the same, the journey can be diverse as you want. And finally, manage the hope by using a shared deck system. I gave my players a visible expiration date on bad luck. I turned "why am I so weak" into "I can't wait until it's my turn to be the vanguard." Because at the end of the day, if your players aren't progressing at the same tempo, they aren't playing the same game. Let's build games where we win and scale together. Thank you for listening.